Hollywood may have been glamorous, but behind the red carpets and glowing marquees lurked movies that sent censors into full meltdown. These films weren't just whispered about. They were pulled, banned, or buried for being too outrageous. What happens when the so-called dream factory dares to show nightmares that society isn't ready for? Stick around, because these classics didn't just rattle audiences. They rewrote the rules of cinema in ways few saw coming. Freaks, 1932. Imagine a movie so unsettling that MGM, the very studio that paid for it, disowned it almost immediately. That was Freaks, Todd Browning's shocking carnival tale that flipped every Hollywood convention upside down. Instead of glamorous stars, Browning cast real circus performers with visible differences, giving audiences an unfiltered look they had never been prepared for. The result? Walkouts, fainting spells, and outrage from critics who called it grotesque and inhuman. But here's the twist. Browning didn't make Freaks to mock or exploit. He grew up around carnivals and wanted to show the humanity of performers who lived on society's edge. In his story, the so-called normal characters are the true villains, while the much-feared freaks form a family bound by loyalty and justice. This message was decades ahead of its time. Yet in 1932, it was simply too much. The UK banned it outright for 31 years, and in the US, theaters demanded massive cuts, slashing over 30 minutes of footage. Browning's career never recovered from the backlash, which is almost tragic considering how influential the film would later become. Today, Freaks is celebrated as a daring cult classic, a movie that asked audiences to question who the real monsters are. Its final storm-soaked climax still delivers chills like nothing else from the era. Banned, censored, and despised at first, Freaks is now remembered as one of the bravest gambles Hollywood ever took. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. Before Jurassic Park made genetic experiments mainstream, there was Island of Lost Souls, a haunting adaptation of H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau. Released in 1932, it delivered a nightmare vision of science gone wrong. The story follows a mad scientist who transforms animals into human-like hybrids in his jungle laboratory. Audiences weren't ready for what they saw. Charles Laughton's performance as Dr. Moreau was mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. With his whip, white suit, and smug grin, he created one of the first great cinematic villains. But it wasn't just his acting that disturbed people. It was the grotesque images of half-human, half-animal creatures. Audiences had never seen anything this raw, this twisted, or this close to horror. Censors wasted no time. The UK banned it for decades, and countries like Germany and India refused to screen it at all. Even in America, local boards hacked away at the film until the story barely held together. Religious groups claimed it challenged the very boundaries of morality, while critics said it left viewers sickened. Ironically, the film's message was a warning about arrogance and cruelty, not a celebration of it. But nuance didn't matter when people were demanding bans. Island of Lost Souls became one of the most suppressed movies of the 1930s. And yet, over time, it earned recognition for its artistry. Its eerie jungle sets, chilling atmosphere, and philosophical edge influenced everything from Planet of the Apes to modern creature features. What was once considered too grotesque for audiences is now hailed as an essential chapter in horror cinema. The Sign of the Cross, 1932. If anyone could outshine spectacle with scandal, it was Cecil B. DeMille. The Sign of the Cross, his sweeping epic set in ancient Rome, was meant to be grand entertainment. Instead, it became one of the most censored films of the decade. Why? Because DeMille didn't just show history, he reveled in its excess. The movie blended stories of early Christians with jaw-dropping depictions of Roman indulgence. There were feasts, parades, and a famous scene involving a bath of milk that left critics fuming. One sequence, known at the time as the Moon Dance, pushed boundaries so far that theaters had to recut entire reels just to keep screenings legal. Add to that the arena scenes, where lions faced off against unarmed humans, and you had a movie that audiences both gasped at and gossiped about. Across America, local censor boards demanded cuts. Some called it immoral, others unfit for decent society. In Britain, scenes were cut so heavily that parts of the story vanished altogether. But audiences kept showing up. DeMille had tapped into something undeniable, the thrill of watching history's grandeur collide with raw brutality. What makes the Sign of the Cross stand out today is not just the controversy, but its craftsmanship. The sets were massive, the costumes dazzling, and the sheer scope unmatched. DeMille knew how to stage a show, even if it meant fighting every censor board in the country. This wasn't just a biblical epic. It was Hollywood daring the public to look at decadence head-on. Too daring for its time, but unforgettable for anyone who saw it. Scarface, 1932. Long before Al Pacino's Say Hello to My Little Friend, there was Howard Hawks's Scarface. Released in 1932, it was the most dangerous gangster film Hollywood had ever produced. Dangerous not because of guns and blood, but because it made audiences fascinated with the criminal at its center. Paul Mooney played Tony Camonte, a thinly veiled version of Al Capone, and he did it with such charm that censors panicked. They feared people would walk out of theaters admiring gangsters instead of condemning them. Authorities demanded reshoots, new endings, and even title changes. At one point, the studio had 3 alternate versions ready, hoping at least one would pass inspection. The violence was graphic for its time: machine gun shootouts, gang wars, and cold-blooded murders. But more shocking was its tone. Hawks and producer Howard Hughes didn't flinch from showing crime as thrilling, chaotic, and even seductive. That mix made the film electric, but also dangerous in the eyes of censors. Entire states banned it, while Chicago authorities tried to keep it out of theaters entirely. Ironically, all that resistance only built its legend. Crowds showed up wanting to see the forbidden movie, and what they got was one of the sharpest crime dramas ever filmed. Today, Scarface is hailed as a masterpiece. Its influence felt in everything from The Godfather to the 1983 remake. But in 1932, it was a lightning rod, proof that film could glamorize as much as it could condemn. The censors were right about one thing: Tony Camonte was unforgettable. Ecstasy, 1933. Before Hedy Lamarr became a Hollywood legend, she starred in a European film so controversial that American customs officers literally seized copies at the border. That film was Ecstasy, a 1933 Czech drama that dared to be natural, unfiltered, and emotionally raw in ways Hollywood wouldn't touch. The story followed a young woman trapped in a loveless marriage who longs for passion and independence. That alone pushed buttons in the early 1930s. But it was the film's openness in showing intimacy and vulnerability that had governments crying scandal. The moment Lamarr appeared, swimming freely in a lake, became infamous. A scene replayed in newspapers and whispered about in moral watchdog circles. Several U.S. states banned it outright. Religious groups protested, customs agents confiscated reels, and critics declared it unfit for American eyes. Ironically, all that outrage turned the movie into legend. It became the film everyone wanted to see, but couldn't. What makes Ecstasy so fascinating today is not just the controversy, but the artistry. Director Gustav Machati framed the story with a poetic eye, using landscapes and silence to convey emotions that dialogue never could. Lamarr, still years away from her Hollywood career, showed the world she was more than just beauty. She was a fearless performer. Though banned, burned, and suppressed, Ecstasy endured. And when Lamarr later became a Hollywood star and inventor, this early film gained even more historical weight. What censors called shocking, modern audiences now see as a bold step toward cinematic honesty. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. When Hollywood adapted William Faulkner's explosive novel Sanctuary, they knew they were playing with fire. The story of Temple Drake wasn't just controversial, it was a full-on dare to Depression-era America. Starring Miriam Hopkins, the film told the tale of a privileged Southern woman who becomes entangled in a nightmare of crime, corruption, and moral decay. Audiences expected a simple cautionary tale. What they got was far darker. Hopkins' performance shocked critics for its intensity. She portrayed Temple as both victim and survivor, someone whose choices led her into an underworld polite society didn't want to acknowledge even existed. Censors saw the film as unrelenting, disturbing, and deeply inappropriate for the time. Several states immediately banned it, while others demanded brutal edits that nearly gutted the story. What truly scared the guardians of morality was how the film exposed society's hypocrisy. It suggested that privilege and social standing couldn't shield you from darkness, and that crime often flourished in the shadows of wealth. For an America still reeling from the Depression, it was too bitter a pill. The backlash to Temple Drake didn't just sink its chances at the box office. It also helped bring about the strict enforcement of the Hays Code in 1934, Hollywood's notorious rulebook for content. In other words, this single film was partly responsible for locking down what could or couldn't be shown on screen for the next 3 decades. Today, it survives as both a riveting drama and a turning point. What was once considered too unwholesome to exist is now seen as a brave, uncompromising attempt to face darkness head-on. Babyface, 1933. Barbara Stanwyck was no stranger to tough roles, but in Babyface, she redefined boldness. Playing Lily Powers, a woman clawing her way up the social ladder by outsmarting and outmaneuvering men in power, Stanwyck delivered a performance that was sharp, unapologetic, and way ahead of its time. Hollywood in 1933 wasn't ready for a female character who used wit and determination to get what she wanted, especially when that meant challenging gender norms. Lily didn't sit quietly in the corner. She took control of her destiny. And while audiences found her story riveting, the censors nearly lost their minds. The problem wasn't just the plot, but the tone. The movie never punished Lily the way moral guidelines demanded. Instead, she thrived. To censors, this was dangerous. Warner Brothers was forced to reshoot the ending, softening it into something that taught a lesson. Even then, several states banned the film, fearing it encouraged women to challenge social roles. Yet, what's fascinating about Babyface is how modern it feels now. Stanwyck's character is neither hero nor villain, but something more complex, ambitious, resilient, and unwilling to play by society's outdated rules. That kind of nuance was practically unheard of in early Hollywood. Though yanked from theaters quickly after release, the film resurfaced decades later and became a cult favorite, often studied as one of the crown jewels of pre-code cinema. Censors wanted to bury it, but they accidentally created a legend. Tarzan and His Mate, 1934. Johnny Weissmuller's Tarzan films were blockbuster hits, family-friendly jungle adventures, or at least that's what MGM wanted them to be. Then came Tarzan and His Mate, a sequel that nearly ended the franchise before it began. The culprit? A now infamous underwater swimming scene that stunned audiences and sent studio executives scrambling. The sequence featured Tarzan's partner Jane, played by Maureen O'Sullivan, diving into a river and swimming gracefully beside Weissmuller. Simple enough, right? Except it was shot with a freedom and naturalism that clashed violently with the strict new standards Hollywood was trying to enforce. Censors immediately demanded the entire scene be cut, and MGM quietly removed it from circulation. For decades, audiences had no idea it even existed. Beyond the scandal, the film itself was one of the most ambitious Tarzan adventures ever filmed. Shot with elaborate jungle sets and daring stunt work, it gave audiences a sweeping action spectacle unlike anything on screen. But the controversy overshadowed it. Local boards called it indecent, while others argued it wasn't fit for the family audiences who loved Tarzan. For years, the censored version was all anyone could see. Only later, when the original footage resurfaced, did audiences realize how much was missing. What once seemed scandalous now looks tame, but it still marks a fascinating moment when even a jungle adventure could trigger censors' wrath. Tarzan and His Mate remains one of the boldest entries in the long-running Tarzan franchise, remembered as much for what was cut as for what made it onto the screen. Reefer Madness, 1936. At first glance, Reefer Madness was meant to be a serious public service announcement. Funded as an educational tool, warning about the dangers of marijuana, it was supposed to scare parents and teens straight. Instead, it became one of the most unintentionally hilarious movies ever made. The film depicted young people spiraling into chaos after trying the forbidden plant, wild parties, reckless behavior, even violence. It was all exaggerated beyond belief, turning a health lesson into pure melodrama. Viewers couldn't take it seriously. Critics at the time called it sensationalist garbage, while some communities banned it entirely for being misleading. But here's where it gets interesting. The film didn't vanish. Enter exploitation producer Dwayne Esper, who bought the rights, chopped it up, and toured it across the country as a lurid attraction. He marketed it not as an educational film, but as scandalous entertainment. Audiences ate it up, not because they believed it, but because they found it absurdly funny. By the 1970s, the movie had found a second life as a midnight cult hit. College students flocked to screenings, laughing at its over-the-top warnings. What had once been banned propaganda was now comedy gold. The irony is hard to ignore. Reefer Madness was banned for being too shocking, but in the end, it became a camp classic, still watched today for its sheer ridiculousness. Sometimes, history has the last laugh. Marijuana, 1936. If Reefer Madness was a failed classroom scare film, Dwayne Esper's Marijuana was its wild cousin. Esper, known for peddling shock reels to roadshow audiences, doubled down on controversy. His movie painted an outrageous picture of young people ruined by marijuana, complete with exaggerated consequences and hysterical storytelling. Mainstream theaters refused to touch it, so Esper hit the road, showing it in small towns with live lecturers who hyped up its supposed warnings. The gimmick worked. The film was presented almost like a carnival act. Watch the scandal on screen, then hear an expert warn you about its real-life dangers. To audiences of the time, it felt edgy, forbidden, and thrilling. But censors and local officials weren't impressed. Many towns banned it outright, arguing that Esper's traveling roadshow was exploiting fear rather than teaching lessons. Despite the bans, the movie thrived in the underground circuit. Its reputation as a forbidden film only made it more desirable. Like Reefer Madness, its message was quickly overshadowed by its sensationalism, and modern audiences often find it laughable. Still, marijuana is an important reminder of how exploitation cinema thrived by skirting mainstream distribution. Esper knew controversy was the best marketing tool. By leaning into scandal, he kept his films alive even when the law said otherwise. It may not be high art, but it's definitely high drama. Proof that sometimes the most banned films were never meant to be masterpieces, just spectacles designed to stir outrage. The Outlaw, 1943. Few filmmakers understood controversy like Howard Hughes. With The Outlaw, his Western starring Jane Russell, Hughes pulled off one of the boldest marketing stunts in Hollywood history. The film itself wasn't groundbreaking in terms of story, a standard frontier tale about Billy the Kid and Doc Holliday, but Hughes had other plans. What made The Outlaw infamous wasn't its gunfights, but its star. Hughes highlighted Jane Russell in a way that no Hollywood studio had dared before. The publicity campaign was relentless, with posters and ads emphasizing her look more than the film's plot. Censors refused to grant the movie approval, claiming Hughes had gone too far. For years, the movie remained in limbo, screened only in limited engagements that kept audiences begging for more. And that was exactly Hughes's plan. He used censorship battles as free advertising, turning outrage into headlines. When the film finally secured a broader release in 1946, it was a box office smash. The scandal had made it unmissable. Critics may have dismissed it as shallow, but history remembers the outlaw for rewriting the playbook on how to use controversy as marketing. Hughes proved you didn't need approval from the moral watchdogs to make a fortune. You just needed them to scream loudly enough to get the public curious. In short, The Outlaw wasn't just a Western. It was Hollywood's first real lesson in how scandal sells. Mom and Dad, 1945. Kroger Babb wasn't a big-name Hollywood director, but with Mom and Dad, he created one of the most banned and most profitable films of its time. Marketed as an educational movie about family planning and health, it bypassed normal distribution and hit the road as a traveling event. Separate screenings were held for men and women, often accompanied by lectures from so-called medical experts. Mainstream theaters refused to touch it, and censorship boards condemned it almost instantly. The Legion of Decency declared it immoral, while community leaders accused it of being exploitative. But instead of sinking the film, the outrage made it unstoppable. Babb leaned into the scandal, plastering posters with slogans like, "See what your parents never told you," and daring audiences to look. The roadshow format gave Mom and Dad a strange power. By framing it as education, Babb got away with showing material that no mainstream Hollywood production could touch. The segregation of screenings added to the sense of mystery. People who went weren't just watching a movie. They were witnessing a forbidden event. Despite being banned in dozens of cities, the film made millions, proving there was a massive audience for content that defied Hollywood's moral gatekeepers. For years, it remained one of the most profitable exploitation films ever made. In the end, Mom and Dad wasn't just a movie. It was a phenomenon that showed how educational labels could outsmart censors, and how controversy could be turned into cold, hard cash. Song of the South, 1946. Disney built its empire on family-friendly entertainment, but Song of the South became the studio's most infamous misstep. Released in 1946, it combined live action with animation in a groundbreaking way, telling stories about a young boy on a Georgia plantation. At the time, critics praised its technical achievements and even awarded it an Academy Award for its beloved song, Zip-a-Dee-Doo-Dah. But trouble came fast. As social awareness grew in the following decades, audiences began to see the film in a very different light. Many accused it of presenting an overly romanticized vision of plantation life, one that glossed over harsh realities. Protests erupted, and Disney gradually pulled the film from circulation. Unlike other controversial classics, Song of the South wasn't just censored, it was quietly buried. For years, Disney has refused to release it on home video in the United States, and it remains locked away in the vault. Ironically, the film that once won praise for its innovation became the company's most forbidden title. Clips survive, and footage circulates online, but for many, the movie itself has taken on almost mythical status. Was it a misunderstood relic of its time or an embarrassing mistake? That debate continues to this day. Song of the South stands as a reminder that even Disney isn't immune to controversy. The same studio that gave the world timeless magic also created a film they've spent decades trying to erase. Lost Boundaries, 1949. In 1949, Lost Boundaries told a story far ahead of its time. A black family living in New England, who passed as white in order to escape prejudice. Based on true events, the film was quiet, thoughtful, and deeply human. But in post-war America, honesty about race was enough to spark outrage. The film was banned in cities like Atlanta and Memphis, where officials claimed it threatened public morals. What they really feared was its challenge to the status quo. The movie dared to show that racism wasn't just about caricatures or stereotypes. It was about everyday life, about families navigating impossible choices in a divided society. By focusing on an educated, middle-class family, rather than stereotypes, Lost Boundaries shattered expectations. It showed viewers a version of America many didn't want to acknowledge. And that was exactly why it was banned. Despite the pushback, the film found audiences who recognized its importance. Critics praised its sincerity, and it later won awards at film festivals abroad. But in the US, the controversy overshadowed its artistry. Censors and officials worked hard to silence it, proof of just how threatening honesty could be. Today, Lost Boundaries is remembered as a landmark film, one that pushed Hollywood, however briefly, toward telling stories of real social complexity. For 1949, that alone was revolutionary. The Moon is Blue, 1953. When director Otto Preminger set out to make The Moon is Blue, he wasn't chasing spectacle or scandal. He was making a witty, sophisticated comedy about relationships in the modern world. But when censors flagged its playful dialogue for being improper, Preminger made a bold decision. He released it without the production code's seal of approval. This was unheard of in 1953. Studios feared releasing a film without approval, believing theaters would refuse to screen it. But Preminger called their bluff. And to everyone's shock, audiences turned up in droves. The film became a box office success, proving that viewers didn't need a seal to tell them what was worth watching. The controversy was less about what the film showed and more about what it said. Its dialogue, full of witty banter about dating and morals, may seem tame now, but at the time, it was scandalous. Some states only allowed late-night screenings, treating it like a forbidden feature instead of a romantic comedy. Preminger's gamble worked. The Moon is Blue didn't just survive, it cracked the armor of the production code. By proving a film could succeed without official approval, it paved the way for the decline of censorship and the eventual end of the code itself. In short, what was once banned for being too bold ended up reshaping Hollywood freedom forever. From carnival nightmares to forbidden comedies, these films prove that Hollywood's history isn't just about glamour. It's about rebellion. Each ban, each scandal, each furious censor's stamp shaped the movies we watch today. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Did one of these banned classics catch you off guard? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this video with fellow movie fans, and subscribe for more hidden Hollywood history that still shakes the screen.